The colony of Havenfall clung to the red cliffs like a stubborn dream. It had been built in haste by refugees from a dying earth. The air was thin. The soil was bitter. The storms came without warning and stripped metal from walls. Still, humans endured. They always did. The giants had arrived 3 years after the landing. They were native to the planet. They stood nearly 3 times the height of a grown human. Their skin carried the grey tone of stone, and their eyes reflected light like deep water. They were stronger than any machine the settlers had brought, and they were afraid. The first meetings had gone poorly. Humans saw size and power. Giants saw fire and noise. A few skirmishes broke out. No one won. No one trusted. Among the giants was one who stood out even among her own kind. Her name, as close as humans could shape it, was Mara. She was larger than the others, broad through the shoulders, heavy at the hips. Her steps shook dust from canyon walls. The other giants kept their distance from her. Humans whispered worse things. They called her clumsy. They called her slow. No one wanted her near, except for Thomas Hale. Thomas was a maintenance engineer. He fixed broken solar panels and patched cracked water lines. He had no talent for politics and no patience for fear. He saw problems and tried to solve them. The first time he met Mara, she was alone near the outer fence of Havenfall. A dust storm had rolled in without warning. One of the supply crawlers had overturned in the wind, pinning a young settler beneath it. Humans were too small to lift the crawler. The wind was too strong for machines. Thomas saw Mara standing at a distance, watching. He ran toward her. The guards shouted at him to stop. They raised rifles. Thomas ignored them. He stepped in front of the giantess and lifted both hands. He spoke slowly through the translator strapped to his collar. "We need help." Mara did not move. Behind him, the storm howled. Thomas pointed toward the trapped boy. He did not beg. He did not threaten. He simply said, "Please." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Mara moved. She walked through the wind as if it were light rain. She crouched beside the overturned crawler. Her massive hands slid beneath the metal frame. With one steady motion, she lifted it clear. Thomas pulled the boy free. The storm passed an hour later. The colony still stood. The boy lived. From that day forward, Thomas brought Mara small offerings. Tools she might find useful. Samples of cooked grain. Pieces of colored cloth from earth. He would sit at the edge of the fence and talk. About the sky. About old cities. About the way humans used to cross oceans for the sake of curiosity. Mara listened. Other humans called Thomas foolish. Other giants mocked Mara for sitting with a creature that barely reached her knee. Still, they met. Over months, trust formed like slow-growing roots. Thomas learned that Mara was strong even for her kind, but her weight made her slower. The giants valued speed in hunts and in war. They left her behind. She carried shame like an extra stone on her back. Thomas told her that humans had once sent ships beyond their own sun even when others believed it was impossible. "We are not fast," he said once. "We are not the strongest. But we endure, we build, we adapt." Mara considered this. Then the sky changed. It began as a thin line of silver in the upper atmosphere. Not a storm, not a natural object. A fleet. The first transmission came in broken bursts. Unknown language. hostile trajectory. The settlers had little defense. A few orbital drones, some mining lasers that could be repurposed. Nothing more. The Giants sensed the threat as well. The fleet was not human. It was not native. It wanted the planet. Panic spread through Haven. Leaders argued. Some wanted to flee into caves. Some wanted to surrender. Some spoke of fighting until the last breath. Thomas stood on the cliff edge and watched the ships descend like falling stars. Mara stood beside him. "They will burn the surface," Thomas said quietly. "They will clear resistance before landing." Mara looked toward the wide canyon that held her people. The giants were strong. They could crush stone, but against ships that burned from the sky, strength meant little. Thomas felt very small. He turned to Mara. "Your people have caverns deep under the canyon walls." She nodded once. "Can they shield against fire from above?" She hesitated. Then she made a low sound that translated as uncertain. Thomas stared at the cliffs. He saw layers of rock. He saw fault lines. He saw the old mining reports stored in his wrist pad. And he saw an idea. "It would collapse," he whispered. Mara tilted her head. "If the canyon walls fell," Thomas said, voice growing steady, "they would fill the valley floor. The ships would lose line of sight. The debris would scatter their energy beams." The translator struggled to keep pace with his quick words. He slowed. "It would bury the entrances. Seal your people underground. Protect them from orbital fire." Mara's eyes widened. "It would also bury Havenfall," he added. Silence stretched between them. Humans could not trigger a collapse of that scale. Their charges were too weak. Their drills too shallow. Giants, however, could strike with force that machines envied. Thomas looked up at her. "We trust you." The fleet broke through the upper cloud layer. Heat shimmered in the sky. Mara studied the cliffs. She studied the settlement below. Tiny shapes moving in fear. No one else stood beside her. Only Thomas. He did not look away. The first beam lanced downward and turned a distant ridge to glass. Mara moved. She strode to the highest wall of the canyon. Each step cracked stone. She placed both hands against the cliff face. She drew in a long breath. Then she struck. The impact echoed like thunder trapped in rock. Cracks shot outward from her fists. Dust poured down in sheets. Again she struck, and again. Other giants watched in shock. Then understanding dawned. One by one, they joined her. Not with her size, not with her weight, but with shared force. The canyon trembled. Humans below saw what was happening. Thomas ran through Havenfall, shouting orders. Evacuate to lower tunnels. Now, he did not know if it would work. Above, ships fired again. Energy beams cut across the cliff face. Mara roared and drove her shoulder into the weakest seam Thomas had shown her months before during a casual walk. He had pointed it out without knowing why. A fault line. A vulnerability. The cliff gave way. A wall of stone broke free. The collapse became unstoppable. Millions of tons of rock thundered downward into the valley. Dust exploded upward in a choking wave. The invading ships fired wildly. Their beams scattered against debris. Sensors lost clarity in the storm of stone and ash. Within minutes, the valley floor was buried beneath a mountain of its own making. Havenfall disappeared. So did the canyon settlement. The fleet hovered uncertainly above a wasteland of dust and unstable terrain. Landing became impossible. Scanning became unreliable. After several tense hours, the ships withdrew to orbit. Days passed before the dust settled enough for movement. Deep beneath layers of rock, humans and giants shared cramped tunnels and emergency rations. The collapse had sealed them in, but it had also shielded them. When rescue teams finally carved passages toward open air, they found that the surface had changed forever. But they were alive. The fleet never returned. Months later, a new settlement rose atop the stabilized stone. Not separate this time. Human structures blended with giant carved halls. Shared wells. Shared storage. Shared defenses. Thomas stood on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt valley. Beside him stood Mara. Her arms bore scars from falling debris. Her steps were slower now. But when humans passed below, they did not whisper insults. Children waved at her. Builders asked her advice on structural supports. She was no longer the unwanted giantess. She was the one who had held up a sky. "You trusted me," she said through the translator. Thomas smiled. "You trusted us first." She looked at the horizon where new towers rose from stone that had once tried to crush them. "What do humans call this?" she asked, "when different peoples stand as one?" Thomas considered the question. "Family," he said at last. Mara let out a deep rumble that might have been laughter. The planet remained harsh. Storms still came. Resources were still scarce. But when the next unknown signal flickered at the edge of their sensors years later, it found not a fragile colony divided by fear, but a united world. Humans and giants stood together on the cliffs, small hands and massive ones ready. Trust had reshaped a canyon. Trust had buried an invasion. And in that unthinkable act of faith between a lone engineer and the giantess no one wanted, humanity had done what it always did best. It endured, not alone, together.